I'm Danny Whitescorn, and this is Behind the Title. I'm so excited for my guest to join us today, Will Lavin. I've worked with Will within Publicis for a couple of years now. Will looks after all operations on the PG1 account, and what's really exciting is that he's going to give us an insight into some of the neurodiversity challenges that he faces today. His biggest one is his stammer.
I've had a stammer my whole life. I used to see it as a challenge, but now I see it as a superpower. And I've spent many years of not wanting to speak, but now I'm here wanting to speak to share my story, but also to show that being neurodiverse isn't a hindrance, it's a adrenaline, the most exciting adrenaline that you'll be on, because it shapes you to be the person who you really are.
Good morning, Will. Or should I say William, as I just heard out there. How are you today?
No, I'm good, thanks.
Thank you so much for joining. We've known each other for a couple of years now. We work in the same organisation. We don't work together. Really, for me, certainly getting people like you onto Behind the Title is a chance to normalise otherwise subjects that aren't necessarily discussed or possibly a taboo in the workplace. So I'm really excited to have you here today. Maybe it's just worth just a kind of a 60-second intro to you, and specifically, some of the challenges that you faced, and then we can dive straight into some of the questions.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for having me. My name is William Lavin. I'm still quite new to the industry. I've been in the industry for 6 years. I joined the very apprenticeship scheme, which is already a slight taboo subject, especially coming into the media industry. But also, I've grown up my whole life with a stammer. I was statemented from primary school, which is incredibly rare to be statemented at that age.
Oh, and sorry, do you mind, what does statemented mean?
So statemented is when you've got learning difficulties that are so severe that you need assistance. It's basically the confirmation from the council, from the government, that this person needs support. So now it's called a educational plan.
Okay.
Where it means that they have to provide you with support, they have to give funding for an extra assistance in school. So growing up, I've always had someone assisting me. I went to a secondary school for people with additional needs, and you had to be statemented to go to that school. Because I've got basically the Long Island iced tea equivalent of neurodiversity. I've got dyslexia, dyspraxia, I'm mildly autistic, and my stammer. And it's an interesting combination because a lot of people think, how does it all add up? Or does it ever cross? And it's interesting how when I was younger, some may have been flagged higher than what they are now. But I think now there are certain things where you grow up, which is forgotten about, especially the workplace. So we speak about dyslexia in the workplace, but actually we never speak about dyspraxia in the workplace. And I think that's a very hidden subject because no one knows how to bring it up because it's not spoken about. And I think with stammer, you can get judged very earlier on in your career. From the moment of the job interview, you can be judged on how you may be portrayed in your role versus then how you sort of are actually in an everyday environment. And I used to despise my stammer growing up, very open about it, because you do fear what other people think. And then now I raise awareness around it to make it more normal, because I hope that one day in podcasts like this, and everyday podcasts like recordings and conversations, the stammer is just the voice without it being the topic of a conversation.
Interesting. We were talking just before. It's openly either being labelled or signalling that you might have a hidden disability. You choose to actively not signal that you have a hidden disability. Why is that?
I think for me, I want people to see me as me because I spent so many years in the past of people judging me or treating me in a different way. And I just want to be treated who I am in an everyday thing. I'll always flag that I'm neurodiverse. I'll always flag that I've got a stammer. But I don't want to be treated in a different way because I think you're being treated for a way how people think you may need versus how you actually are as a person, because no human's the same. Like, there's people,
that's true.
and I think you can walk in and like there may be 10 people in a room with hidden disabilities, but yet I'm guaranteed that you can't point out what they all have. So how can you treat everyone in the same sort of way? And I think for a lot of people, we want normality, but yet we also don't want to be treated in a different way. So it's crossing that line of how do we get the support of understanding without that change of mindset of how you treat that person. And for me, because being neurodiverse, you can clock on people's, like, how they react,
Of course.
how they talk to you. And versus from when you're younger, you tell that people are talking to you in a different way. And it's like now, versus like those conversations that you have now, and it's interesting, those people from years ago, and if they've not seen me in like 20 years or so, they're still talking to me in that way, when actually, I'm like, why are you talking that way? I now work in Central, I work in the advertising industry, that's not who I was, I'm not who I am.
You're not who you were,
exactly.
10, 15 years ago. No, totally. For me, that's a really helpful intro for people that are listening or watching. It's really interesting to hear some of the challenges and points of view on that. We've got some specific segments that we're looking to cover off in this podcast. And the first one that I think is really interesting is, I guess, what happens backstage, right? It's in our minds every day, there's lots that's going on. And I guess what I would love to understand from you is, was there a moment where you perhaps looked fine on the outside, but perhaps you were barely holding it together?
I think in general, neurodiverse people have a very good masking skill that you don't want to show how you're feeling, but sometimes it can just blow up. And there's been times where you may not see it, but yet if someone said one word, I could be done.
And what sort of word?
It could be any word. Like, for instance, I was on a ferry. Like, I can have different like sensory overloads, like different smells and stuff, and I'm very sensitive to smells. Like, I find it very hard to eat on a plane sometimes. Like, in a train, if everyone's eating around me, I find that very hard. And I was in New Zealand with my sister, we were travelling. We got on this ferry to like move from one island to the next, and we went into this one room, and we had like, there was a TV on, there were people eating, and I just said to myself, and like, because ferries aren't, you can just smell the sea, it was quite a rocky ferry, and I said, we have to move seats, I can't do this. And like, everything was just building up so much, and I said, I'm just going to take myself out to get fresh air, because everything was just building up so much that normally you wouldn't think about. But if there's a TV going on, there's people talking, there's food, different food smells going on, it can just go boom and can just mess with you. But then I could be at a bar in London where that same environment and could be absolutely fine. So I could come into the office, have a really busy day in the office, be completely fine, but I may go to the theatre that evening in a very similar sort of noises, and I could really struggle in that environment. And I think people don't understand how no one knows when a neurodiverse person could have any like hidden thing, because it can be quite quick, or it could be a slow processing. Like, if I'm on a night out, the moment my brain says I'm done, that's when I leave straight away, because my brain's like, I know that I'll be checking the time, I know that I'll be checking my trains, I'll know that I'm planning what time I need to leave. Because there's no point in me staying there, because I know that my brain is just done, cut. And,
of course.
But then if I'm in the environment, and there's little things that every day that people don't see, like for me with my stammer, H's are really hard. It's like saying hello or hi. So if you're walking into the office, you see someone you know coming in, I go, hi Will, and then I may stammer, and I often like stammer in that moment because it's that quick thing. So for me, by the time the hello has come out, they've gone and gone into the lift. And like, I've had it like already this morning, and like in like the station, I saw someone who I knew, and they're like, hi, and I was like, and then that gap, and then I feel sort of bad that they think that I've ignored them. and they've gone off, but actually it's that sort of like quick thing because you don't know what to do, and like you can't really say "Ooh, sorry," and that happens every single day, and it's a really weird. But you couldn't tell at all.
And do you said you feel bad about that person perhaps not hearing or getting the response that maybe we expect day to day, but how does that make you feel? Like, not about that person. Does that elicit an emotion?
Yeah, it's hard because like you don't want to feel like you're coming across as rude or like you're just smiling at them, like, oh, hi, and it's like, but you do feel bad. Like there's often where I could be walking around the office and senior leadership could walk past and go, hi, and you're like, hi, and then it just looks like awkward, and it may come across as not a professional.
Would you say there's a different or a better way? Like, because what I'd love people to get from these sessions is that it can change behaviour.
Yeah.
And so is there a different way you'd like... I know you don't want to, isolate yourself or signal that you have a hidden disability, but is a wave better, or is it just a nod? Like, is there something that works better for you in that situation?
It's sort of weird because at the same time, I'd rather just still say hi and like just keep that normal interaction.
Yeah.
Exact same.
Interesting. It comes back to the point of just normalising. Yeah. It is what it is. You accept where you are.
Yeah.
Okay. And by the way, I should add, I have terrible motion sickness. So if you put me on a ferry, honestly, put me on a ferry, put me on a ship, my other half partner and my stepson, they quite frequently take the mickey out of me for not being able to, I get it in cars as well. So I don't think that's, mutually exclusive. I actually struggle sometimes with things that are too loud, too much sound. Sometimes I find I have to be in the right mindset. So there's probably some neurodiversity in there somewhere. But I find it really interesting. Something so small like that is possibly the start of maybe something that might be you kind of having a tough time on the inside. Just before we move on, so is there one specific moment that you really found you were struggling, but on the outside you were masking it, and it's not about trying to evoke reactions from the past, but I'm just keen to understand if there was one specific time when you were struggling with something.
I think it was actually a few weeks ago, like in the office sometimes it can get like very, very busy. And like often there's like this brief near us where no one uses, and people forget to use headphones because people think they're in that environment where, and they forget that there's no roof on it. And it was a really busy day. Everyone was in. There were people in that booth having calls without headphones and loud. They were loud. There was music on, and there was at one point where I just thought, I had noise cancelling loop earplugs. I had headphones on, so I was in double layered of trying to block out the noise. And someone made eye contact with me, and I begged my friend, and I just shook my head back. Was like, don't say anything. Was like, because if someone had said something, I literally could have just. So I took myself to a cafe. Was like, right, I just need to get a coffee. And then people were like, oh yeah, I'll come with you. And I was like, no, thank you. Was like, I just need to just, and like, just that moment of stepping out just made such a difference. Because like, you often don't know like what could happen next. Like, there's been times where it can literally come very close. And like, I've often, not even like in the office, like in certain situations where I've just taken myself out of situations where,
of course.
And I've just gone, oh, I just need to make a quick phone call. And I've literally gone, whoa, like, but it's weird, like, I can be in a really busy, like, studio, or like, I can be in a really busy environment, and I'd be absolutely fine. Or there'd be one thing where I can just feel my stomach completely turn, my headset just completely changes, the volumes just go up massively. And I don't call it because people go, oh, it's just an anxiety attack, it's just a panic attack. And I'm like, unless you've had a proper sensory overload, when everything's heightened, like you could say one joke and I just want to cut you out. Like, you never know what one thing can make. And I think it's scary because your brain at the best of times overthinks everything. And when you're in that overload, you overthink everything times 1,000. And like often there's been times where I've been fine, but I often get it like a post sensory overload. So like I could be having a really great day doing a massive, like huge achievement, and the next day I could be in a really anxious state and a really odd state because everything sort of come down. And I think for me, it's sort of that where I used to be, like versus where I am now. It's sort of that change of mindset, being like, should I be? And I look at some of the people who I was on a similar page on, I like school, who may have maybe been slightly more autistic or slightly more like dyslexic, and I think, am I in this, doing this for the right reasons? And like it really plays with your brain in that environment.
Wow. It fascinates me because obviously neurodiversity, you know, that you've got kind of a real spectrum where it might be visible, it might not be visible, it might be extreme, it might be mild. I find, whether it's, you know, personally or professionally, for a long time I spent locked in my head thinking, shit, I wish I'd said that. Whether it was through something that happened to me on a personal level, within work, within family, friends, you know, has there been a time you found that either you've been in crisis, you know, mental health crisis, or, you know, within work or personal, you wish you'd said something? It's
one of those things where there's times where I definitely could be like, but it's that fear of the preconception that if you say you're having, like, you're really struggling with this aspect, or like you don't want to be seen as you're just being like a diva. Because I did a event with Channel 4 and it had like different neurodiverse panel, and it had like Sam Thompson, Fern Brady, some other people, and she made a really interesting point that I can really relate to, being like, you don't want to come across as like a diva, saying that the lights are too bright. We often have to put ourselves forward, but often we sometimes make ourselves feel like we'll be judged without the hidden meaning of why we need those things done, because you don't want to sound like you're too fussy, or like you're being too overcompensating, or like, if I want to be sitting near an exit, it doesn't mean that I'm not going to enjoy the event and I want to swiftly escape. It means that if I do need to escape, I can take a breather. It's less obvious to do that. Sure. And I think there's often been times in like work, like in my instance, where I flagged it after, and everyone's been so understanding, and they've gone, why didn't you say it before? And it's like, if I said it in the moment, that could have broken me in that moment, and then I didn't want that to change how you saw it, but also I don't want to see. When you say it would break you, what do you mean? Because to me, I think to myself, for anyone that's struggling with something, I think it is the fear of, you know, either being set back in, you know, their career, or the fear of being judged by a partner, which I find, again, difficult to understand, mainly because I'm quite vocal when I'm struggling, and maybe that's because I've done quite a lot through the recovery program that I'm, you know, part of, and it teaches me that it's better out than in. I need to write the pen, you know, put the pen to paper. I need to kind of pause every morning, take quiet time and just reflect. And then at night time, just sit there and think about, how was my day? What did I do right? What did I do wrong? But when you say, you know, was it overload you said? Or what is the reason why you wouldn't have spoken up in one of those scenarios? You feel very vulnerable in those moments. And I think because you're already overthinking everything, and I think you fear that you may come across as like you're not capable. And I think because a lot of people deem neurodiversity as they're not capable of doing stuff. And I think if it's something so simple like a loud office, like a really smelly, like someone's really smelly lunch, it can come across as like that hidden vulnerability. Even though no one will judge you, no one will change how they see you, and everyone will be a very safe space, but it's that fear of like, will people see me in a different way because of this instance? Or like, even though that's never the case, and it never will be, because if I was in an environment where they would judge me, I wouldn't be in that place in the first place. And I think people, you fear that not only would they see, like, everyone would be very supportive, I think, on yourself, It's also not sort of embarrassment. It's that sort of
Is it embarrassment though?
I think it is. Like, you're sort of embarrassed that you're sort of masking something that you tell yourself that you can't let out, but people see it. You think that they'll see your truthful side. You sort of the guard down, but actually the guard down is actually healthier to see than someone not being the true self.
I mean, that's what this is all about, right? Like, I'm not here to have a sanitized conversation. You know, I've shared it before. I'm quite open about some of the challenges that I've had to overcome around addiction and mental health. And if I can help anyone, you know, beyond this, you know, environment here, if I can help anyone do something differently, you know, I feel like I've fulfilled my purpose in this world. Definitely. That might sound quite grandiose, but we met a couple of years ago, and I was blown away by your story. Not for any other reason than how brave it was for you to actually be facing head on. And again, this was before I understood the breadth and depth of your hidden disability. And you know, I saw you stand up in front of a room of 130 people, and I was like, that deserves far more than me turning up in a pitch, you know, coaching my stepson's football team, helping someone else, you know, overcome addiction. They're all, you know, valid in their own right, but I think it's just amazing. Like, and you know, my hope is that you can pave the way for other leaders that may not be as open about some of their challenges. What are some of those workplace or personal triggers that you face on a day-to-day basis it's important for others to watch out for?
It can change every day. Like, there could be some triggers that may set me off. Like, there could be the same triggers that will not do anything. And I think for me, it can also be like fatigue, like if I'm tired or if I've got a lot going on that may cause me to stammer more, and it may make me feel more sort of vulnerable as like a person. But for me, my stammer, I always use the sort of example as like an old car engine. If I'm working from home, you're not talking to everyone. You're only talking to like the people who you live with or your local coffee shop. And that's not enough conversation to engage. And like, you do your Teams call, but you're not engaging in that everyday like chat. So if I'm recording a podcast that evening, I know that my stammer will be a lot worse than if I recorded a podcast if I had been in the office all day. Because you're talking all the day in the office, you're buying your coffee, you're talking to someone in the lift, you're having meetings, or on your desk you're talking to people. And my stammer's the best is when I'm in the office and talking to people, versus when I'm not at home. And when I travel, if I do a lot of solo traveling, my stammer when I come back is awful because I'm not speaking. And sometimes I can be quite mute coming off a flight because my voice hasn't just had that churning.
It's like a double-edged sword. Yeah. You're with people and it's too much, or you're by yourself and it's too little. Yeah. Okay.
And like, especially like there are some times where I'm a very methodical thinker and I could get a task done that would normally take 2 hours done like an hour because my brain is just like bam, 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 bam. Or it may take me 6 hours to do that 1 hour task because of the brain processing speed. And it's like, there's some times that you can just have a change of mindset and you can just go bam, out, hash it out, done. Or you can be on that same mindset, but yet your brain just doesn't get distracted, but it's just seeing it as a lot longer, and you think you need a lot more reassurance. You're asking for like people to check it more, when actually it doesn't need to be checked, but your brain's just going through that extra caution stage of course. And it's bizarre how like my triggers today have been completely different to what they were yesterday. And yesterday was just completely different to how they were the day before.
And are your triggers different to, if we take, you know, someone who may have exactly the same condition as you?
Yeah, completely different.
So everyone has totally different triggers. They come at different times. There's no set way. So I guess with that in mind...
Certain relations, they may be related, but I know some people with a stammer who can't say the letter S's. But for me to get my stammer to be more confident, I do things that your average person with a stammer would never normally do. Because I'm like, for me to get over it and talk about it, I need to be putting myself forward to be doing team presentations, or like, I need to be coming on podcasts and stuff and like having that conversation, because otherwise you do get in your own rut. And I think, how can you motivate others if you can't motivate yourself to do it? And I think sometimes the triggers are annoying and stuff. For God's sake, why? It was like, and then you just do it again, and when you can do it, and it's always the best feeling after. But like, I mean, sometimes the triggers can bite you right in the last second. So let's say we had a guest speaker coming into the office, the most amazing tour, and in that whole meeting, I could be having like questions bubbling up ready for the Q&A. The moment someone goes, let's say you said, right, it's time for the Q&A, here's got a question. Bam, confidence gone, nothing, and it's just that silence of being like, and by the time I've got my confidence to ask a question is when we've got one last question and then everyone's got their hand up. So there's been times like when you said missed opportunities.
Yeah.
There's been many times where I could have asked a question to someone, but I've just missed opportunity to do it. And I think
It's mad.
when you're networking now, if I go to like a networking event, like a brand event, or like I come to a work event, and let's say in one room there are like all the different CEOs of like Publicis in one room, I could either go up to every one of them and ask them questions, or I may only speak to like one of them and then find it and not have the confidence to go up to everyone. And like there's this different situations where I could gain a lot of experience in talking to them, or I may come back with no knowledge at all because I've not had that sort of that trigger.
Yeah. This is why I want to flip it a little bit, because I think that everyone struggles with that.
Yeah.
I want to give you a sense that you're not the only one, but I understand how in your head that might elicit a certain type of response, bodily and mental. But I think everyone struggles with it. You know, a lot of people say to me, you know, I'm the first to speak up. I'm sometimes the loudest in the office. So I know we don't work in the same office. So you're probably quite lucky there. Yeah, I think that a lot of the things that you talked about there, I think many others experience, but it doesn't elicit the same response. And I think that's the really important point, is that whether visible or invisible, you know, there are certain triggers that will definitely affect people that are neurodiverse. And we talk about the mirror moment, right? Do you ever find yourself metaphorically or physically standing in front of a mirror, giving yourself a piece of advice? Or do you ever think about your future self and think about what do you want to say to that person, either to overcome a challenge or to build yourself up around a specific subject? You know,
I always do it, and I think I spent so many years of finding a reason to say no to something rather than finding a reason to say yes. And I think that sort of mindset, because I used to not feel accepted in certain environments because I thought people saw me how I saw myself 15 years ago. Like, if it was that someone's leaving drinks at work, I would normally leave at like 7 o'clock. So I thought, this is my time to like check out, because I'm not sort of in that, because my confidence wasn't there, even though they definitely didn't see that, like they just saw me as me. But for me, it took me a while for me to match my sort of the confidence, how other people see me versus how I see myself. And I think there's often that mirror moment of where you got the angel and like the devil. You want to do something, go forward, and when you're like, oh, but you, in like a fun way, I sometimes see myself as like a fraud in like certain things, because I'm like, I really shouldn't be at this event. It's like, why am I out of all these people at this Thought Park launch event when actually there are a lot more people out there? But actually, for me, I'm like, no, I should be saying I am here. I've worked so hard to get to this moment. What I find really weird is that I have a mirror moment whenever I'm writing a speech, because I've always got the angel of my stammer going, oh, you need to change that word. Because all the speeches I do, presentations, and like you probably noticed that when I did the planning power session, my PowerPoint changed ever so slightly all the time because the wording changed. Because like for me, I was changing certain words to make it more stammer friendly. Because I know that if I had that word, I won't stammer on that word. So I always change my wording slightly. So it may look exactly the same to someone, or people are like, it's so weird. Like my old manager was like, right, you've written this thing and you've changed it, but it still says the exact same message. She was like, but I can't work out what you've done. And I was like, I've just changed some of the words to like a stammer-friendly word. But then when I'm talking about my stammer, I've got the angel going, you know, you need to change that word because you won't stammer. And then the devil's like, but you're talking about your stammer, you should still be saying those words that you stammer on, because that's what you're there to talk about.
Yeah.
And when we talk about like when it all comes together, like those moments, when I did my TEDx, no joke, I cannot remember everything beforehand. There's a photo of me with one of the other speakers, do not remember taking it at all. I saw it after, like, who's this guy? I was like, I do not remember that. Then after, like, I remember like sitting on like the sidelines waiting to go on. The only thing that I could see was like the big TED letters, and they aren't small, they're probably taller than like probably that stand behind us. And I could hear every clock tick, and then the actual speech itself was like 15 minutes, but it felt like 2 minutes. And then after, the like backstage crew were like, oh yeah, we've reserved the front row for speakers, so if you want to, you can go and watch the next speaker. And I went, not yet, thank you, I'll come later, but I just need to have an empty room. And they said, oh, yeah, sure. And I literally went into that room, and I just stood there in silence, being like, what the hell just happened? And my phone was just going off like crazy. And then I went out with friends after, had the most incredible day, and I had no sort of emotional release. And I had the odd moment where I was watching the speaker, and my brain was like, because you know when you see someone on stage, you're like, they're brave for doing that, standing up on that stage. And my brain was like, well, they're bold standing on that stage. And then my brain was like, hold on, that was me 15 minutes ago on that stage.
We forget sometimes.
And like you forget that was us in that moment.
Give me an example of a few stammer-friendly words. Never even thought about this. And if you don't have them, that's fine as well. I'm just intrigued to know what would be the nuance.
So I find A's and I's quite hard.
Okay.
So if I'm talking about doing influence activity, sometimes I can find saying the word influencer quite hard.
Okay.
So otherwise, I would say social media collaboration.
Wow.
So even though it's longer, it's sort of like, it's the exact same meaning, but yet it's completely different. And like when I was doing my apprenticeship, doing my portfolio, my coach, she just rang me out of nowhere and went, your brain just fascinates me. I've reread your whole like portfolio presentation. It just reads exactly the same, but yet I can tell that you've changed wording to it. Your sentences still float in the exact same way. They've not come across as like a different meaning. So like you could read that sentence out in both ways, and yet the other person would still know exactly what you meant by that.
Of course.
And she's like, how long does it take you to find the other word? And it takes like a millisecond, because like it's in that moment. And like I find like saying like Amazon hard, so I would just say prime, and we both know that they both mean the exact same thing, but yet is that hidden thing. So I always pre-think all my sentences without realising it. So like, even though, like as we discussed earlier, this is a very natural conversation, I still know in my head what could come up. So I know that if there's any words, and there's a quote that I love that says, people with a stammer, you need to listen to what they say, because they thought long and hard about what they want to tell you. And that's the truth of behind someone with a stammer.
It's almost like your brain is like 10 seconds ahead. Yeah. It has to be.
Yeah. But you would have no idea, like, doing that whole planning power. No. Like, I know that in that meeting, there were a lot more stammer-friendly words, and I know that I stammered a lot more in that meeting. Then the dean came up to me after and she went, oh, wow, that was amazing, you didn't stammer at all. Then I was like, oh, I did, but you just couldn't tell. And it was fascinating.
The second stammer you did for Amazon there,
yeah.
I have to be honest with you, I didn't know if you were just giving me, like you were almost recreating an example, but that was quite real. And yeah. I'll be honest with you, I didn't, because I know you, yeah. I say this in good spirits, I felt uncomfortable because I didn't know how to respond there.
Exactly.
Because there's a part of me innately that wants to save someone when I see them like that, or there's a part of me that doesn't know how to process. I know that's not my job, my responsibility. Yeah. What's really interesting, though, is that point around the words. As an industry, are we demonstrating, I know not everyone will experience that, but are we thinking about creating alternatives? Are we actually, as an industry, championing, like we are with some of the initiatives within the business that we work in and I see out there, are we championing different ways to approach that for neurodivergent people? That was...
But your brain sees it in a different way, and I think this person who I know, she presents BBC Radio 4 Women's Hour, and like she does like her Radio 5 shows, and she's got a stammer. And I said, do you stammer when you present with radio? And he said, the only time I may stammer is when I read the headlines. Because in my show, I can choose what I write. I can choose how I say things. But you can't change the headlines. You can't change that storyline. You can't swap the words, because one word that you may change in that headline could cause something massive. And she's like, that's the only time that I may stammer on the radio. You would have no idea otherwise, because she just changes her show and like she changes her script around her stammer. Like, but often, like you say, like in a client meeting, sometimes we do just have to say the word, and it's like, but will they judge me in a different way when I'm presenting back those figures? You felt sort of uncomfortable in that moment, and it's like,
but not uncomfortable. Like as I know you, but
you could feel it.
Like I visibly felt more on the Amazon point than I did on influencer.
Yeah.
It wasn't the stammer; it was the facial expression, and because to me that looks uncomfortable for you.
Yeah. So that's when people's brains turn. And like people say to me, it's like, oh, would you go into the traitors? And I'm like, well, I can judge people very well, because like you're judging people's character. And that's what I mean earlier, was like you learn how people are reacting to you. It was like, even though they try and mask it as much as possible, you can always change a slight glimmer in someone's eye line, or like how they change it. Like, even though that I know that if I stammered at work, like I could do a TV interview and not be nervous at all. But I found the context, the TEDx run through that I did in the office, way more nerve-wracking than I did the actual TEDx itself. Because for me, I get nervous about my stammer in front of people who I know versus then people who I don't know.
So let me just, I want to add to that there, and then I want to move on to the final point. I say this quite a lot. So, we work in an industry where we're pitching all the time.
Yeah.
I often find the most nerve-wracking part of a pitch is the rehearsals.
Yeah.
In front of my peers, in front of my bosses. It feels like a live job interview.
Yeah.
It feels like I could pass or fail.
Yeah.
Anytime. So again, I don't think that's mutually exclusive to people that are neurodivergent. But what I have learned over time, and it's clear that you've done that, is the more and more I do, the more and more I rehearse, the more and more I prepare, actually, the effects that has in the moment when I'm in it makes it so much easier, because I've taken away the element of surprise.
Yeah.
I've still got some of that adrenaline, but I've taken away the element of surprise, which I guess, you've done, TED Talks, you've done BBC radio, you've got your own podcast, it's Stammer Stories, which, everyone should go and listen and check it out. Is that because you genuinely enjoy it, or is that because you're raising awareness, or is it just the both? What's the motivator and driver for that?
It gives me the biggest thrill ever. And I think for me, my message is, how can I motivate someone with a stammer? Like, if I just do a team presentation, that barely touches the sides. And I think if I can do something bigger, that can make such bigger impact.
Wow.
But you just remind me of a really funny moment. So when we were doing like the campaign, like presentation for like Agency of the Year, I remember like being really nervous for like the actual rehearsal bit. And then for the actual presentation itself, me and Pri, who I was doing it itself, we were both checking our heart rates going, oh God. And we were so nervous, because like that was my first like big all the agency meeting. And like Louise had to come over, Peter from Chancery Lane, Katie, someone from my team, she had to come over. And there was a few other faces who I knew. And when I do something, I can't look at someone who I know. And there was at some points where I would look at someone, they're in tears. I turn the other person, they're in tears. I turned to another person, they're in tears. And then I just found someone who I'd never met before, the most deadpan, sort of not really showing any emotion. Was like, right, you're my perfect target to look at. Because if I see someone getting emotional, it throws me off guard completely. But if I see someone who just shows no emotion at all, they're my prime target to stare at. And then I teamed him afterwards, like, I'm really sorry for staring you down in my presentation, but like, you were a great person. So, because like, sometimes you just need to find that familiar, but not familiar phase.
Yeah.
And it just helps the situation so much more.
Amazing. I've learned more about you now. We worked together for a couple of years and about neurodivergency than I have or could read in anything online. What I really want to do as part of this series is give people permission to either feel, say, do, or stop doing? If we think about that permission slip, what would you say to people that are struggling with a hidden disability? How can they ensure that they keep themselves safe? They go after the thrill. What would you say to others?
Never hide it. Always take that box. Like, always, if you're doing a job application or like you're flagging you've got a hidden disability, never be afraid to tick that box. People think that you may get treated in a different way, and it's 2025, but you all know that you do, but it's for the best, and that you will get the support that you need. And even though it doesn't have to be an open discussion, like I'm quite unusual being quite open about it, but yeah, it means that it is on the books, it is allowed, and if you do need those resources, they know that it's there for you. And I think people are a lot more interested in it than you think. We've had conversations which have been fascinating. I think neurodiversity is a fascinating subject, because I think around like disability in general, if someone tells you that they're disabled, you just don't assume that someone's in a wheelchair. They could be anything, like any type of disability. If it's to like their bodies, or like with their brain, or like anything. But like, if you tell someone that you got a stammer, they either expect you to have a severe stammer, and that's it. Or if you tell someone that you are autistic, they expect a slightly severely autistic person, and not someone who's all aspects of the spectrum. We need to just be more accepting that anyone can be at any scale of what neurodiversities they have, but it doesn't mean that it changes them as a person. So it always adds and I see it as a great addition to a company or like to a friendship group. You're a neurodiverse person from your team. Yes, they may be a bit slow at reading your email, but yet guaranteed that they probably gave you the most methodical project layout that no one could have come up with, because they'll do a plan for your plan. Or like, they may give you another creative aspect that, because a lot of neurodiverse people are very creative. And I think people overlook the label and not actually see the benefit of how the brain can work in that environment. Because yes, my stammer people expect that I don't want to present, but actually I'm one of the most forthcoming people about wanting to present. You can see the both balances, because yeah, you're accepting them into your agency, which is amazing, but actually it's great for you because you're sort of helping them grow into a person. Like, you're seeing the other side of it, because I think if you look at some of the neurodiverse people in the world, like Walt Disney, Steve Jobs, Richard Branson, there's so many incredible neurodiverse people, like Jamie Oliver can't read a book, and all his cookbooks have been done by a dictaphone. And you think, how can one of the UK's top-selling publishers have never read a book before, but yet look at where he is? And I think it just adds a whole other conversation to it.
Sure, it's amazing, and there was some work done recently by Channel 4. I think I thought it was fantastic, even just changing the letters on the graphics on screen during the show. It really made me think. Okay, so just close us out. One wish, one dream, one hope for people with a neurodivergent condition or a stammer.
One wish is that I hope that you're just seen as you, and you're comfortable saying it without being judged in it. Hope is that you're comfortable in just being your true self, because I think everyone hides who they really are, especially in the workplace. And I think you will notice a big difference in yourself. And I think a dream is just to see more brands, like more sort of actual hidden understanding, because my approach is hidden messaging. And I think, how can we make sure that it's not the speciality, that it's not a special edition of an advert, or that character isn't known for their storyline for being autistic or being something. How can we just make it as just part of general society? Because that's how I think we can change normality, is just seeing it every day, rather than just saying, oh, that character on EastEnders is autistic, so that's going to be their storyline about being autistic, which is amazing. But it doesn't always have to be the storyline. It can just be them as a person.
Amazing. Will, or as I said at the beginning, William. I'm not sure how to address you now. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
For those that are listening, Will has a phenomenal podcast. He talks about his stammer and how he supports anyone else with a condition online. It's fascinating. You've taught me more than I've learned, as I said, in a short space of time today, and I certainly won't be saying hi to you. I'll just give you a little wave next time I see you. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. I've absolutely loved it.